This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop Founder Friday edition. Today we're talking with Colin Harmon of 3FE Coffee in Dublin, Ireland. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to Keys to the Shop and this Founder Friday edition, the fourth edition of our series where we look at founders and entrepreneurs who run some of the best coffee shops around. And I'm really thrilled today to be able to give you an interview with Colin Harmon of 3FE Coffee. He is a four-time Irish Barista Champion and fourth place World Barista Champion. He is the owner of 3FE Coffee, a groundbreaking coffee bar in Dublin, Ireland, and one of the early movers in the specialty coffee scene in Ireland. It's really great to be able to chat with him. I've always respected his work, his thoughts on specialty coffee, his operations that I've admired from afar. And he has a new book that he has released called What I Know About Running Coffee Shops, which essentially is all about his experiences, insights, and opinions about how to properly run a great coffee operation. Now, for those of you who are interested in opening your own coffee bar, or maybe running the one that you have right now better, or just have an interest in how coffee bars work, this is going to be a great book for you. And we get into a little bit of what content is in that book. And we start in this episode by talking to him about the story of how he started in 3FE, a little bit about his journey as an entrepreneur, and then we start talking about the book and the contents of that book. So now that I've built up your anticipation, I'm going to bring you right to my interview with Colin Harmon of 3FE Coffee and the author of the new book, What I Know About Running Coffee Shops. Colin Harmon, owner and founder of 3FE Coffee in Dublin, Ireland. Welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, as am I. Definitely been a busy time for you. You've just, you're going to be 2 days from the time of the recording of this podcast. You've got your new book coming out, What I Know About Running Coffee Shops. We want to talk a little bit about the book in this episode, but I'm really interested to hear the story of 3FE. I've always admired what you guys have done in Dublin with the culture of your shop. And from what I've heard in your presentations at WBC and different Tamper Tantrum talks on your podcast and live, you're just someone who's really balanced with your perspective on the industry, staffing, culture. You didn't really start in coffee, though. You chose coffee over a life of investment banking, and that's how it all started for you. How did you make that decision?
It was a difficult decision at the time, but it's not one I regret at all. My background is I have a degree in business and law from the University College Dublin, and at the far end of that, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I got a job as a trustee officer for professional investment funds, which is essentially like a watchdog on investment funds. So it's all retrospective analysis. It's nothing like, it's not the cutting edge kind of stockroom floor that you see on the TV. It's just an office with an Excel sheet. But it was a relatively lucrative career, and, you know, a very clear and defined career path and very safe and pensionable job and everything. But I frankly found that kind of terrifying, you know, just the fact that I know where I'd be in 13 and a half years time. And all the way through university. And I suppose since I was 15, I'd been working in hospitality in some way, shape or form. And as soon as I got the job that I'd worked, you know, for 4 years in university to get, I kind of realized that I wanted to go back into the job that had supported me through those college years. So I just quit my job. And at the time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something in food and drink, kind of open a restaurant or a cafe or a bar or something. And I kind of wandered around a little bit through jobs, and then I realized that, you know, I was going to focus on coffee. So I got a job as a barista. A year to the day after I started working as a barista, I finished fourth in the World Barista Championships in Atlanta, 2009. So after that, like, I really wasn't going to turn around. I just been kept going since, you know.
So did that play a large role in how you started the idea of starting your own coffee shop?
Yeah, well, like, during that process, I took pretty drastic measures, I suppose. Like, and like your audience, I'm sure, is probably mostly US based, so I should probably explain the context of this. Is that, like, at the time, like, Stephen Morrissey had won the World Barista Championships the year before in 2008 in Copenhagen, representing Ireland. But Stephen was based in London at the time in the UK. And he was working with Square Mile. And in Ireland, the coffee scene was, like, when I say it wasn't very developed, I mean it was pretty much non-existent, you know. Like, there was very little specialty coffee. There were no competition spec Aurelias in shops that I knew of. You know, I mean, we had no Sinessos. There was no, you know, I couldn't think of a shop that would have like a Rober E, for example. There was no, like, there was any of the kind of, like, the things that you take for granted in a specialty coffee shop at the time. Like, just, it wasn't in Ireland. I used to fly to London to go visit coffee shops. So I sold my car and I used the money to buy an espresso machine. So, like, a 2-group version of the competition machine. And I installed that Aurelia in my spare bedroom. And that became like a training room for me. So I just basically train all day long, talking to judges that weren't there, and kind of refine that routine. So by the time I got to Atlanta for the World Championships, it was like, it just felt like I was in that training room, even though there was, like, whatever, 3,000 people staring at me. So it's kind of like the context was very, very different for me. And when we went to open the shop, then, like, the shop is called 3FE, stands for Third Floor Espresso. So it's taking that kind of attention to detail that was in play in that third floor apartment and bring it to a shop front. And, like, again, in those days, like, when we opened, we were probably the first cafe in the country to serve a Chemex. You know what I mean? It was, wow. We definitely were only cafe that were doing, like, single origin coffees, or, like, Has Been were supplying us at the time. So, like, the quality of coffee that we had was, like, you just didn't see it, you know. So, but that kind of, like, unique and very kind of focused step into specialty coffee was what we could offer people, and it managed to grow from there.
So you were the catalyst. This 3FE was sort of the catalyst for, if we can say, third wave coffee in Ireland.
People say that a lot, and I wish it were true. Like, I don't know if many of your listeners have been to Dublin, and I get in trouble for saying this in Dublin, but in Dublin we tend to look to London and New York and, you know, cities like that to kind of and see what's happening there, and then we'll kind of have our own take on it. And specialty coffee was happening, like what Has Been and Square Mile and other roasteries in the UK were doing was really terrific. And the coffee scene in London at that time was just so vibrant, and it was just a wonderful thing to be part of. Like, and I say be part of, I was flying over there to go to events, you know. So I could see it was going to happen in Dublin. And if I hadn't done anything, it definitely would have happened anyway. But I just happened to be the first mover on it. And with the competitions, that helped, because, like, over the next 5 years, I competed 4 times and won 4 times. And that was such a great podium to build a business off, you know. And it brought us a level of attention and, I suppose, credence as well, because it's like, coffee in Dublin was so different at the time that if I just opened and served people this coffee that tastes completely different to what they were used to, they wouldn't have taken it as well as they did had I not had the trophies on the wall behind me, because it made them go, well, okay, he must know what he's talking about because he has these trophies here, you know. So for that reason, the competitions helped a lot. But I think specialty coffee has grown in every city in Europe in the years since. So undoubtedly it would have happened in Dublin as well. We just happened to move at the right time.
Sure. Now you're opening 3FE. What was your goal in opening that store? What was your vision for that store?
I suppose in the early days, I didn't really, like, it seems strange. I had a business degree, and I came from a finance background, but I had no real, like, financial goals as such. Aside from just creating a career for myself, I just wanted to do something that I wanted to do. I've been kind of doing stuff that I didn't want to do for so long. I just wanted to find something that I wanted to do. And I didn't really think past that, you know. I wanted kind of to open a roastery, but I knew that like without volume, it was a very difficult thing to pull off. So that was kind of parked for a few years. And aside from that, like I just love the creative kind of the creative process and just doing things that are fresh and interesting and just getting the buzz off meeting people. And that was just everything, you know. Like I couldn't believe that I was in this position where, like, as hard as it was, that I could still do something that I loved, and that was my job, and I was allowed to. You know what I mean? And that lasted me about 2 or 3 years. You know, I was just, aside from that, I just wanted to make it better all the time. Like, and I think in those days, like coffee quality has come so far since those days that, like today, we're seeing incremental improvements. You know, but in those days, it wasn't so unusual for you to make somebody coffee and it would be like, they'd be like, that's 90% better than any other coffee I've ever had. You know what I mean? Like that wouldn't be unusual. But like today, there's so much coffee that's of decent quality and there's more people serving similar types of coffee around that it's like the improvements they're not as profound as they were before. You know what I mean? Like I was traveling to London to visit coffee shops to have a cup of coffee. I remember going to Atlanta, for the WBC and visiting Octane. I'd just been blown away that you could buy natural Ethiopians at a coffee shop.
Wow.
They just, because they were things I bought on the internet, you know what I mean? And they were doing the Adida Mr. Valley, and I was just like, this coffee is incredible. I'm just like not wondering, like, I'm just trying to figure out why everybody wasn't going crazy that they were able to buy this. You know what I mean? And it was just so far and removed from where we were at the time.
It's so great, a sign of our success as an industry at large. It seems to have such a culture now where it seems kind of commonplace to get these types of coffees all across the country here in the U.S. and also there in Ireland and in Europe. It's a really great thing. Yeah, completely. And
I think the difficult thing for us going forward is I remember if we got a new grinder or a new espresso machine, you'd see like huge improvements just overnight, you know.
Mm-hmm.
What we're seeing is more incremental improvement, you know. So the gains are smaller, but I suppose they get hard. It gets harder and harder to make substantial gains. You know what I mean? And that's the challenge that we have going forward. So it's how do we get more people on board quicker? You know, like I'm not sure we'll see those leaps in quality that we did before, or maybe we will. I don't know, but that's the challenge, I suppose.
Well, speaking of challenges, what were some of the early challenges that you faced in opening 3FE during those times where these kind of improvements just came in large waves? I imagine the problems also did.
Yeah, like the big thing probably was money. Like I think like my dad gave me some money to set up, like about $5,000 or so, and it was. Yeah, like that's enough to buy yourself a nice dishwasher, I think is the saying I always rattle out. But it's at no point did I think about going and getting financing or going to a bank or anything. It just wasn't in my mind because I just really didn't have a clue what I was doing, you know. And the shop that I had was very small. Like initially when I opened, it was just me and a few tables, you know, and there's a lot you won't understand until you're in that process, you know what I mean? And just being able to build up the business bit by bit by bit, you know, and like, so in those days it was just me and I'd serve like 20 cups of coffee a day and that was about it. Like today, like you said, there's 3 shops, there's a roastery and I think I lost count of staff when it went over 40. So it's come a long way, you know? And it's, but I think that initially the challenge was just understanding the how a business works in terms of cash flow and using money appropriately and stuff. And that's kind of, it slowed us down an awful lot at the start, but I think that's almost what made us, you know what I mean? Like if I'd gone out and gotten a huge bank loan and opened a big massive, like I just rented a shop on a high street, I don't think it would have lasted 6 months. You know, I don't think I was mature enough to deal with that at that stage. like to deal with staff and suppliers and all those sort of things. But having a small little sandbox where, a disastrous mistake might cost me €100 instead of €100,000, then that was a better thing for me. So it allowed me to build confidence as I grew the business.
Really good fertile ground for experimentation. And I wonder, what's an example that you could give us of a time that was particularly difficult that turned out to just be pivotal for your business?
I think like I was always very inquisitive, and probably the point where I was too inquisitive. Like I think I was always looking for more answers, and it came from a place of having no experience, And when I came back to World Championships, everybody's like, "Oh, you're the fourth best barista in the world," which, like today or even then, I knew is not really the truth. I just came fourth in the competition, but that's regardless of whether that's self-proclaimed. That's people will say that that's what you think about yourself. You know what I mean? So there's this huge pressure on me. So all of a sudden, I was like, I needed to go and figure out all this stuff, because it was expected of me that I would know the answers to all these things. And I remember, like, one way to sum that up would be like, I remember meeting Tim Stiles before the competition, and he tried my coffee and he was like, "Is that a pulp natural?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's pretty pulp natural, all right." I didn't know what he was talking about. Like, I'd never heard the phrase, and yet I was like inadvertently the fourth best barista in the world. Like, I don't really understand how I finished fourth at that competition, but there I was, and it was a great opportunity. So when I came back to Dublin after the competition, I felt a huge pressure to then go and find answers, and that brought me into contact with people like Vince Fidele, who was developing the VST tools at the time, and with Steve Layden, who went on to become my business partner, and with like Nuova Simonelli, who I've gone on to develop grinders and stuff with. And it was that kind of like need to go and find information. And I suppose the blog and Twitter and stuff like that, like, and getting involved in things like that helped push it along. So in the end, like, what I saw as like a huge challenge for me actually turned out to be the making of me, because it gave me access to a world of people that have been instrumental in the success of our business.
That's great. And you have a roastery now. You have 3 stores, wholesale accounts. Your kitchen is turning out what looks to be amazing food. So we've grown so much since that one bar in the lobby of the Twisted Pepper. Over 40 staff. So you've come a long way. What has been the best part about this journey for you?
I think, like, honestly, it's like I said, like my concern when I started was building a career path, and I set out like very selfishly because like I'd walked away from a very good job, and I had a girlfriend who is now my wife, who, like, regardless of what she said, was not going to hang around forever. You know what I mean? Like, I put our lives on hold for a few years, just because I liked cups of coffee. So my focus was on developing a career path for myself. And I remember, like, as I went along, people that came to work at 3FE would sometimes leave and be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go off and get a proper job now." And I remember just being like shocked by this, being like, "Well, we're doing this. We're going to take over the world with coffee. This is going to happen." And not understanding how they couldn't buy into it. But like, looking back, I can completely understand, like, they needed to go look after themselves as much as I was looking after myself. So the challenge then quickly focused itself on like building career paths for other people. And we have people that work in wholesale for us, or or chefs or baristas and managers and stuff, who have come into us, not knowing anything about coffee, just looking for a part-time job, and have just gotten sucked into this idea that we have going, and now they're huge parts of our business. I mean, like, Monica Palava, who works with us, is like, she came in as a barista. I don't think even let her make coffee when she started, and then she like entered some competitions. So she's 2-time Slovakian Barista Champion. She became, a head barista and a manager. And she worked in the kitchen for a while, and then she was working in at the roastery, and now she's like the head roaster at our roastery. So they're responsible for all the roasting there, and she manages the team down there. So it's like her progression to the company is mirrored in other aspects of the business as well, and it's really great to see.
That's excellent. I remember seeing the first Tamper Tantrum live. I think it was 2011. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you all surprised her with flowers in that episode. And
I remember. Yeah.
And I think that also was the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, where you presented what must have been sort of like, this for beginnings of the idea of this book of what I know about running a coffee shop was a presentation that you gave in that. I wonder, the comment you made earlier about how now it's about incremental improvements, part of me thinks that it also forces us to think of something to improve outside of the coffee quality that's begun to not necessarily plateau, but you can get excellent coffee a lot of places, but maybe not have excellent businesses a lot of places. What kind of inspired you to turn that talk into a book?
I think the reaction from it, to be honest with you, like I had so many people contact me and say, oh, they watched this talk and they'd ask me questions about things I'd said, or said that it's like, I do a lot of traveling with Nuova Simonelli, like I said, and I do a lot of events and people come up and talk to you afterwards and say, oh, I saw that talk and it really helped me. It's really weird, like, especially with Temper Tantrum. I'm sure you have the same with this podcast. It's like you put it out there and if you see the numbers and you go, oh, that's great. But then when someone comes and they say that they listened to it or they watched it, it's a whole different level of realization. You're like, whoa, there are people out there that listen to this, like actual people, not just numbers,
Absolutely.
And I think I enjoyed doing that as well. So I kind of like the idea for the book came very quickly after that. Like Cosimo Lombardo at Nuova Simonelli who's now at Toby's estate. He's a really good friend of mine. Was very quick to push me down that road. Said, like, you should follow this up. You should do something. And I was like, yeah, adamant that I would do it. And it never really pushed itself along. There's always something more important that needed to be done rather than this folly that I had an idea that might work, And then about a year and a half ago, I enrolled in a master's course in University College Dublin again. And as part of that, you have to launch your own business. So the book seemed to kind of present itself as a good way to, get two birds with one stone, because the business is as busy as it is. And then I've got two kids expecting one more. I've got, the college course itself, and then various other things that just, I have going on as I tend to have. So it was a good opportunity to finally get it done, because to me, it feels a little bit like the cafe, like, my motivation for getting into the cafe in the first place was very much coming from like my friends and family who were saying, listen, you need to just do it, and if it doesn't work out, you can just move on, because you talking about it all the time is kind of annoying. So you just need to have a crack at it. You know what I mean? So with the book, it was kind of this monkey on my shoulder, and I just said, okay, I'll need to have a crack at this, and if it doesn't take off, that's fine, but I need to at least say I tried.
Excellent. Well, it looks like it's taken off well. It hasn't, in the recording of this episode, it's 2 days away from its official launch on the 20th. And I did see that you managed to just liquidate a ton of these books at the London Coffee Festival. So I'd say the reaction's been pretty great.
Yeah, no, I'm lucky. Like there's definitely been a lot of interest out there. We've got like a few thousand of them going out to Hong Kong, which has helped enormously. And then I'm definitely in a privileged position, because at 3FE we'll sell a few thousand books this year anyway. Like the James Hoffman book is always a really good seller. And then you have like Maxwell Colin Dashwood's book, and the Scott Rao books, which always sell well everywhere. So we sell a lot of books as it is. So I kind of have a network there. You know what I mean?
your own Barnes and Nobles or whatever the Irish equivalent is.
Yeah. So we have like about 90 wholesale customers, and then like we're starting to start shipping international soon, because we've only ever focused on Ireland. So traditionally, like 3FE until this stage, we've been roasting since this is our 4th year roasting, I believe. And before that, we were wholesalers for Has Been Coffee, but we've only ever focused on the Irish market. So like we have like in Ireland, if you come to the best cafes in Dublin, you'll see like these great coffees from really great roasteries like the Coffee Collective or Copy or the Barn, and they do a really, really great job. And they're nibbling away at our market, and we're leaving them to it. You know what I mean? So it was like, we should go international as well. But like we held back on it for a while, because we want to get really good at what we do before we start to scale things out. You know what I mean? So now we can sell the book through the larger distribution channel, international sales as well. So that should be a good way to do it. And then also we have international partners. So through the Mythos tours that I've done, like I know people that run businesses really similar to 3FE, and they're just, dropping me emails and saying, hey, can we get 20 books or we can get 60 books, or it's just a nice way to get them out there. And it's good because like I met with a few publishers and they're already cool, and they're very good at what they do, but it kind of like I'm sure you're the same. You like people that run businesses tend to have an inner streak of petulance, and we want things to be done our way. So with this book, it might be the only book that I ever do. So I was like, you know what? If I just do it myself, I don't have to worry about, like, if I don't sell any books, that's fine. This could be the only book I ever do, and as long as I like it and it's what I set out to achieve, then that to me is a victory. Obviously I'd like to sell some books, so if you can get both, that's great. But I think I didn't have to worry about a lot of the the compromises that like a more commercially oriented operation would have to do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So it's worked out pretty well. I'm hopeful that might actually be the making of the book in the end, because it was kind of made without fear. Because I'm pretty sure, like, with the sales we've already covered the cost of the book. So anything after this is a bonus.
Absolutely. And authenticity and transparency is definitely an all-time high in terms of what people value. And this book is just chock full of so much insight. And something that struck me about the book, not only is it obviously going to be foundational for people's understanding of opening a coffee shop, and what I view as sort of like a new generation of the books that when I got started in coffee, and I originally wanted to open my own coffee shop, and haven't yet, maybe one day, but there was books on the market. There's 2 or 3 like how to open a coffee shop for dummies and things like that. But since then, there really hasn't been anything that we can sink our teeth into as an industry, especially in specialty coffee. And I think this is sort of like a very timely book to come around. You touch on a nerve here, I think, with the content, because so much of this is the nitty-gritty of operations and things that will make a business successful. You do talk about coffee a little bit in this book, but what I hear a lot in the book is, here's how you can have a business that can be sustainable and successful so that you can have that great coffee all the time. Was that the goal of the book, sort of to dive into that section that may be a little bit off to the side in our consciousness?
Yeah, like I think there's lots of, like, I looked at what's there already, and there's lots of books about how to brew coffee and about coffee, and I didn't want to just join that kind of queue of books because I wanted to contribute something that was unique. And then there's lots of business books as well, but I think if I have one talent, which hopefully I do, then I think I've managed to, I think, carve a niche for myself where I've developed trust with a lot of people in terms of how do you make great coffee and how do you run a business. And I think that's kind of like, there's lots of books about coffee and lots of books about business, but I wanted to occupy the ground in between. So I kind of joked that people that, it's everything you can't learn about running a coffee shop in a book, so you can't learn it. And it's, I don't know, like it's that a lot of life lessons and anecdotes and things like that, and almost like writing a letter to myself 6 years back, or 8 years. Jeez, how long is it now? It's longer than that. I'm showing my age now. Yeah, like 8 or 9, 10 years ago. And saying, look, if you'd have known this at the start, then it would have been a lot more help. And then coupled with that, I suppose, is that, like, I've sent it to a few coffee people who were like, who liked it, but were like, I'm going to say slightly disappointed, because they're like, I expected more about coffee in there. And that was very purposely done. I think, like, I read a lot of books about people's jobs, like whether they be engineers or cyclists or bricklayers or chefs. And I'm just interested in the realities of what their jobs are. So I'm hoping that I can pick up a secondary audience of people who just have a passing interest in coffee and coffee shops and stuff, Like I meet lots of people who say, "Oh, I'd love to open a coffee shop someday," and I say, "Well, you should do it." And they go, "Oh no, I'm never going to do it." And it's just kind of like a little pipe dream that they're happy to just let it sit there. You know what I mean? And I'd like to think that a few people like that would pick it up as well. So I've been careful about who I send the proofs to, because I didn't want to just send it to coffee people or to people that I know. So I sent it to some people that like just work in completely different fields, and they found it really interesting, which is I suppose it's a good sign, but time will tell.
So your audience, your intended audience is the people who are open coffee shops or thinking or dreaming about it, or just interested in the business side or the operations side of the industry.
Yeah, completely. But at the same time, like I don't. It's meant to be easy to read, and it's meant to be like insightful, whether you want to run a shop or if you don't want to run a shop, and there's bits where like there's some chapters where I know in my mind that's like, if I imagine a person, I say they'll probably flick through this chapter, but they're going to love the next chapter. You know what I mean? And they're all short chapters as well, so you can kind of dip in and out of them. I kind of difficulty with attention span myself at the best of times, so I probably made that with someone like me in mind. But it's proved really good. Like there's a few of them out there in the wild already, like that were on pre-release just from books that I've sent people, or from that were picked up at the London Coffee Festival. And it's just been really heartening to get like emails and text messages from people who run coffee shops saying like, "Thank you for doing this." And it's because there's a big risk in it. There's a lot of stuff in there that I'm not particularly proud of either. Like mistakes I've made or whatever. So when you get people coming back to you and telling you this stuff is useful and that they're implementing some of these things, and that in itself is a reward.
So before we get to the next section here, where we talk with Colin about the book, a little bit about the contents of his new book, I wanted to take a second to talk about our sponsor, Prima Coffee. Prima is a specialty coffee equipment supplier based out of here in Louisville, Kentucky. And from their inception, they have set out to make the best coffee brewing equipment available to the general public. Their focus is on curating the best equipment for every need, from grinders to espresso machines to under-counter fridges and pretty much anything you can think of. They put a big emphasis on having the expertise to help their customers get the right gear to fit every situation. And I've known these guys from the beginning. Great company, great group of coffee people, and I can't recommend them enough. And right now, when you visit prima-coffee.com, you can use the promo code KEYS10, that's KEYS 10, and that'll give you $10 off of any purchase over $75. Some restrictions do apply. So be sure to check out prima-coffee.com and use the promo code KEYS10. And I know you all are going to have a really great experience with Prima Coffee. And thanks, Prima, for your support and sponsorship of Keys to the Shop. Now let's get back to our conversation with Colin as we dive into some of what you can find inside of his new book, What I Know About Running Coffee Shops. I think it would be great to dive into the book a little bit and explore what people can expect from it. You start out by talking a little bit about something that's maybe it's weirdly overlooked by anybody starting a business. And that is, you say that we should first get a job. What do you mean by that?
So we help people open up coffee shops. That's we sell machines and roasters roasters machines and coffee, and we do training, and I meet a lot of people. I get a lot of emails from people who want to open a coffee shop, and the first thing I always say to them is like, "Have you got any experience?" And sometimes they have lots of experience, and that's great, and other times they have none. And I was once in that boat, so I completely understand it, But in saying that, my first job, I was 15. I worked at McDonald's, like the busiest McDonald's in Ireland. It was, I think, like a 600-seater restaurant. So,
wow.
And then I've worked in bars and hotels and restaurants and lots of places. So I have hospitality experience, and like anyone that's worked in hospitality knows like how that works, the tone of conversation that you're used to, the sort of skill set that you need. Okay. And it's a hard thing to tell people about, because most people, especially people that have come from like, the more professional institutions, someone who's like say an architect or an accountant or a lawyer for a living, they would probably just look at what we do as really easy, And I don't understand why that is as well. And it's not easy. It's really hard. Like, it's really, really hard. So a lot of the time I'm trying to get them to get a job just so they can get an insight into what they're actually getting themselves into. And like, it's strange because a very common answer that I get back from people is that, they'd almost laugh at me. Oh, no, I'd never get a job in a coffee shop. And I'm like, well, you're going to go work in one soon because you're proposing you're going to open one, Now, in some situations, there are people who who want to own a coffee shop, but they've no intention of working it. That's also fine. But then my next question is like, how much money do you have to throw at this? Because if you're not going to work in it, you're going to need to know, you're going to have a lot of money to bankroll it, and you're going to need to have, hiring skills, and you need to have, you're going to need to be very organized, that kind of stuff. So the best advice for someone in that situation is just go and get a job because it'll give you an insight. And the other thing is that, you'll learn how to run a coffee shop and somebody will pay you to do it. Whereas, it's, you can do all the training courses you want, but actually just working in a coffee shop and seeing how it runs that's an invaluable thing to do. And like, I've helped people set up coffee shops and they've gotten 6 months into it and come to see me and be like, I hate this. Like, I hate this job. And I'm like, yeah, well, you should have experienced it before you went, and because it's not for everybody. There's a very, people, I'm sure most of your listeners can have had similar conversations with people where people go, oh, it'd be great to have a coffee shop. It'd be wonderful. And like, I'm not saying, like, I love my job, but it's not what it's made out to be. The reality is a very, very different thing. And getting an insight into that before you actually go and chuck, $100,000 at it is a really good thing, because it might turn out that you don't want to do it.
Yeah, and there might be even people who would want to use your book as a substitute for getting a job in coffee. Just the same, no matter how good the book is, I would say that experience is definitely worth having, especially because you can also empathize with the people that you're going to be managing and leading.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, because most of my work nowadays is working with the people who work for 3FE. So like working with them, and empathizing with them is the biggest challenge. And I think I understand what it's like to work in a coffee shop, and I understand the fear of not knowing where you're going to be in 3 years' time or 4 years' time or 5 years' time. So like, what I always say to them is like, okay, you guys look after the short term, I look after the long term. That's my job. And as long as you're doing really well, I'll think of your next step. I'll figure something out,
Nice.
And it's a dangerous thing to promise people, but I think our track record has shown that we can do that. And if it's not at 3FE, there's lots of really great people who've come through 3FE, like Tom Cooney, who now runs wholesale for Supreme in Australia, or Jen Rugolo, who does Tamper Tantrum, or like there's a whole list of people that have come through 3FE and gone on to really great things. And it's nice to look back on that and say, we upskilled them so they could make those steps, or we contributed in some way, or pass them on to somebody who helped them develop even further, and all those things are very, very rewarding. But that's the thing, is that it's very easy to come into a business and look at people as just like, as units, like that unit needs to do this much productivity today. But like, understanding what it's like to do those jobs is a really, really important thing.
In order to have that business that can sustain those careers in coffee, we have to know that the idea is going to work out. And there's a part in your book after the introduction where you talk about the difference between a great idea versus a great business plan. I wonder if you could elaborate on what the main differences are and how we can tell.
It's one that's not even peculiar to coffee. Like, I think in Dublin where we are, we're like within a city block of us are in each direction is Twitter, Google, Facebook, and Stripe. So we're right in the middle of the tech zone, and the tech world is full of like great ideas that will never make any money. That's almost my first reference point to people when I talk to them about them wanting to open businesses and coffee shops or bars or restaurants or whatever they're trying to do. And like, a great business idea is one that will capture people's imagination and people will enjoy, and and they'll come back to, and they'll tell their friends. Like, that's a great business idea. A great business plan is a system where, the money that you take in is greater than the money that you pay out, and how that works, who you work with, what the structures are, what contracts are in place, all that kind of stuff, And you can have really great business ideas that will fail because there's no business plan. And then conversely, you can have, pretty poor business ideas that are excellent business plans. So I'm doing a master's course at the moment, and a lot of the people that I see, like my classmates or people that are in other classes that I talk to, and I remember being in the stage, and they're all focused on creating this wonderful idea that, that you go for a beer with your friends and you tell them your idea and everybody just puts their drink down and goes, oh my God, that's an incredible idea. That's amazing. And it's not really like that, some of the most successful businesses I know are really boring. They don't do very interesting things. They just, they take in X and they pay out Y, and X is substantially greater than Y, and there's definitely things I could do at the moment that would be better in terms of a business plan than what I'm doing now. But it's about balancing the two, so for me, I really need to love what I'm doing, and I do love what I'm doing. And thankfully it's profitable. But I think it's at a level, where it's it's a good business idea and we have a good business plan, but the two things are separate things and can coexist, but one doesn't mean the other. I think anyone can think of their favorite like a bar or a cafe or restaurant that they loved that just went out of business. And if it takes you, if you can seat 20 people in your cafe, but it takes you 10 people to run the cafe, then unless I'm missing something quite dramatic here, you probably don't have a business plan that's viable. Do you know what I mean? And that's the difficulty of people, because when they go and when they pitch their idea to people and they tell people about what they want to do, everyone just says, that's wonderful, that's great. And then their Instagram followers are mounting, and, they're getting these mentions in the newspaper, and, all the bloggers are coming out to see them, and everybody loves the quality of what they're doing, and they think that this is great. And that stuff is really, really important. But unless there's a business plan at the back to make it work, then it's not going to end well. And I think in the society we live in today, to completely labor the point, I think there's a culture of investment out there where investors will just plow money into an idea and just keep plowing, especially in tech. Well, we're seeing more of this in hospitality, where you have wealthy benefactors who are just plowing money into this bottomless pit that they hope someday will go profitable, and it won't. And all that really does is make it harder for people that are trying to do things properly. You know what I mean? And the bar is put incredibly high, and it's harder to reach that bar. So it's not really good for anyone.
And it's almost a false vision of success, in a sense that where we used to, or people still do, try to play a larger store's game by using them as their example, by using a coffee shop that's funded, even though it's not a solid business inside. They can't tell it. If you're just starting a business and you look to somebody who's funded and try to mimic what they're doing, you're kind of contracting that disease, so to speak. Like, the idea isn't as good as it looks. You don't know what's going on the inside. You'd be better off just doing what's true to yourself rather than using that as an example. Completely.
And I think, to me, if things ever went so well that I was looking to invest in something, the first thing I would look for would be a business plan, and if people have a good idea about how they're going to make this business work, and even if the numbers are small, that to me is more impressive than somebody who's doing crazy numbers and turnover but is losing money, Mm-hmm. And I've seen this before. I've seen places that they'll spend 7 figures fitting a place out, and they've crazy turnover, but they also have crazy staff cost. And I ate in a place a couple of weeks back, and there was about 30 people eating there. I won't say where it was now, but if I told you the name of this place, you'll have probably heard of it. It's one of the most famous restaurants around. But there was about 30 people eating, I'd say, and I'd say there was 50 staff. And none of them were doing very much, and it was crazy. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, this some woman or some guy in the background with a checkbook just writing checks and saying, oh, I just want the space to be open,
Absolutely. So once we get this coffee bar open and we've got a pretty solid action plan, our business plan is solid and we're going to make money, and it's a good idea too, there are some things that are considered basics of running a coffee shop, and you get into that in the book. You have a list of basics that I thought, as I was reading through them, we're in the middle of revamping our standard operating procedures for some of the opening and closing lists at the shop here in Louisville. So I was chuckling at some of the things like don't serve drinks with drips down the side of the cup. Little things that it sounds like these are things that get overlooked somehow, but contribute to a large impact on the customer's experience.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing about that list because it's not an exhaustive list. And originally when I wrote the list, there was a bit of a blurb beforehand that said, this is a list of some of the things that we do. You should make your own list. And the editor suggested to say, why don't we just put the list in? Like, and just stick the list in. And like, I've talked to people since who have just taken that list and added their own things. Just when you see a list in front of you, it makes people realize the importance of having a list of things like that. You know what I mean? And there's lots of small things that just, like, I'll often say about 3FE this, you can't promise people that you're going to blow them away every single time they come. That every time they come, they're going to have this amazing coffee. It's just not something you can deliver on. And like, it's worrying when something like WBC happens in your city because you have, 10,000 coffee nerds knocking on the door with these unreal expectations of what's going to happen. But what our focus is instead is like always making sure that it's never bad. You know what I mean? And that's what coffee shops are about. It's like you don't wake up with every morning and try to fall in love with your wife all over again. It's not how it works. You don't like make her fall in love with you every day. That's not what it's about. So there's a bit more like lists like that, or like little small things that ensure that things are never bad. And there's lists in everything that we do, and it's an incredibly important part of running any business.
In the book, you mentioned that service is one of those overlooked places. Typically, it's the last thing people look to invest time or money in. Why do you think that is?
I think it's an because, like, to me, I visit lots of coffee bars, and they're like, "Oh, if only we had this grinder, or if only we had that machine, or if only we had more chairs." And sometimes in the back of your mind, I'm like, you could be nicer to your customers. That would help. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's so important. Like, it's everything. Like, if you go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal, but the service is great, you're going to give them another try. You're going to like, maybe they just had an off day. But if you go to a restaurant and the food is great and the service is terrible, you're not going to go back. You just don't like those people anymore. And service is such a powerful thing. It's like what we do is hospitality, regardless of whether you think it's coffee or whatever. It's hospitality is our business. And it's the best way to grow your business. It's the best way to get people engaged on what you do. And it doesn't cost anything, like, and there's definitely training courses you can do, and you can spend time working with staff and, things like that. But like smiling and saying hello to people is free, like it doesn't cost anything. And it's just so much for a business. And I think like with what I see with coffee shops the world over is that the first concern that people have is like, okay, let's get an architect in here and spend, $250,000 building out a place and get the best machines and grinder. And then they think about the coffee and it's like, okay, we'll get the best coffee. And sometimes they don't get the best coffee because they spent all the money on the machines. And if they do get the machines and the fit out and the coffee at that stage, like, it's incredible how often they'll just like not put any money into training staff in terms of like education and, like whether they send them to the SCAA for training courses or to do like, hospitality courses or things. And a lot of the time it's based out of fear because our industry is a transient one. Like, a lot of people are just doing it until they get a real job or until they, they finish university or whatever. But like, I've always been fairly aggressive with that sort of stuff in terms of like investing in staff, because what I see is that it makes them want to stick around more. It makes them, we've had staff who had aspirations of doing other things and I just said, I'm going to stay here because you guys keep, rewarding me, investing in me, and it seems to be working and I like what I do. So it's a really good way to keep people on board,
Absolutely. We tend to lean away from the human part, the HR part of the job, rather than lean into it. When in fact, oftentimes, more often than not, people return for the human element more so than maybe even the quality of the coffee. And would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's an easy kind of road to go down, you know. But I mean, ultimately, businesses are about people, and I think you can always tell. You know, you go to a bar or a cafe, restaurant, whatever it is. Like if everyone's getting on well and people are happy, you can tell. You want to. There's a lovely buzz in the room, and you want to be part of that. You know, it's incredibly important, and it's difficult as well. You know, I think that's probably another reason why people shy away from it, because once you open the Pandora's box of trying to make everybody happy, like it's very, you can end up in all sorts of places, and it's not always possible either. You know, it's easier just to tell people, like, you do that, I'll pay this, shut up, that's it. You know, that's the deal. But trying to engage with staff is rewarding when it goes right, but it's also very, very difficult at the best of times.
You talk about having a strong system as a way of retaining staff. How do you go about, and how do you suggest go about finding great people to staff a cafe, and kind of the beginnings of building the system that will help keep them in the cafe?
Well, a lot of the credit for, I suppose, this bit, and I go into it because down to like two of the staff that we have here at 3FE. Well, one is Robin Butler, and then who runs the shop in Canal Street, and then the other is Adam Sheridan, who has since gone on to open 5 Points, which is a cafe we co-own with him. And them two basically built this system for recruiting people. The most notable part of it is kind of an idea robbed from Mark Ashbridge at Established in Belfast, where we literally have this online survey, and it's about 60 questions long, and you have to fill out all the questions. You know, now what we find, you can tell this on the stats at the back end and stuff, is that so a lot of people get like 10, 15 questions in and they just quit. They go, oh. But like, so what it does, it weeds out all those people that, like, the first thing we always want to do with an interview is figure out, do they want a job or do they want this job? And there's a big difference, you know. So it gets rid of those people. So at least we know people, if they finish the survey, they really, really want the job. And then there's a lot of things that you can find out that are really important that you might not think to ask in an interview, or you kind of think they go without saying, but like sometimes I've hired people and realized that I should have said it. So things like, I don't know, like, can you work Sundays? Are you available to get to work between the hours of 6:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m.? And like, very often people say, no, I can only start work at 11 o'clock. And you're like, and that's, in some situations, that's fine, but it's important that you know that, because if you hire them and then you say, oh, you know, you're in work 6:30 on Monday morning, and they go, oh, I can't start till 11. That's a problem. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And if you end up in a situation where you need to take on a part-time person, and you've had someone who's filled in the survey, and they say, oh, look, I've got a child, I need to drop the child to a creche, and they don't, which means they wouldn't be able to start working until 11. Like, very often I'm reluctant to take on people for part-time work, because, you know, it's a difficult job to do, and I don't want to hire people for a few hours a day, because I don't think, you want to make sure they get enough hours so that's worth their while. But, you know, a question like that in a survey could have revealed a situation where there's somebody who's very happy to do 4 hours a day because that's all they can do. And it just, you know, it suits their lifestyle, and that's what they want. And you're like, you wouldn't get that really in an interview, you know. And sometimes, you know, it's very difficult to tick all the boxes. There's other things like, you know, like especially with in Ireland, like working visas is a very important thing. So making sure people have a valid working visa, which is good. It's important to note from the start. And just like basic things. And one of the questions we asked towards the end is, you know, we asked them to just write 4 or 5 sentences on their thoughts on creating an inclusive work environment. And it's amazing how many people like stop at that question. They get 59 questions in and then just quit the survey, you know. Yeah. And, you know, we definitely try to create an inclusive work environment at 3FE, and one that is, you know, we want to be, you know, as inclusive with different, you know, with different races or people, you know, different genders or backgrounds, whatever, you know, and we want to be as inclusive as we possibly can with regard to all of those things, which is admittedly difficult in a country which is 98.2% white Irish. So we have to be very careful with things like this, and yes. So it's hard to be proactive in some of these situations. But it's what I don't want is it's other things as well. Like if people are coming in and being aggressive with people or bullying people, that's not something that we put up with. But if you mention that in a survey, like a lot of the time, there's been lots of people that would look at the survey and go, "Oh, these guys sound like a bunch of kooks. I'm not going to sign up to this place."
Yeah.
So the other thing is that like we've had staff that have come through that process, and it's made clear to them that these things are important to us. So when there is a problem, they don't see it as an issue for them to raise it. You know what I mean? So like if someone is being bullied, or if someone has said something that's insulted them, in a lot of working environments, they just keep their mouth shut, and they'd be unhappy, and it's very demotivating for people. It's not nice. So, you should feel safe at work. Mm-hmm. Whereas if we've raised this before they've even, if we've made it clear to them that we care about these things before they've even taken the job, then they don't think anything of just knocking on my door and going, "Hey, Colin, can I have a chat about something that happened? I didn't feel really great about it." And that's a really good thing, because in a lot of cases, those situations can be resolved really quickly with just a talk between a few people and acknowledging that something was said that they didn't mean or that they regret saying. And then everybody can move on. It's just an awful lot easier to do those sort of things. But clearing the way for people is really important.
Yeah, great systems of communication from the beginning, making it clear that it's okay to communicate about these things.
Completely. And like most of the problems that we have, regardless of what section of the business in, are down to communications. Like if you can communicate well as a business, it solves so many problems, and that's, I think, something we try to focus on, and we can always get so much better at.
So we touched on just a few things of so many. There's so many other things in this book that are just wonderful insights into running a coffee shop. So I wonder, out of all the things that people could get out of this book, what is it that you most hope people walk away with?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. Yeah, like I definitely, like, it's there to give people advice. I want people to go, okay, that I can apply that to what I do every day, and that's really rewarding. And I don't know, in a weird sort of way, like I really want people to enjoy the book. I want people to close that last page and go, you know what, that was worthwhile. Like I really enjoyed reading it. And I think definitely a lot of the books that I read when I was getting into coffee weren't particularly enjoyable when I was reading them. And it was hard to engage with them. And by the time I finished them, I didn't remember anything, because I wasn't flicking, page after page, rifling through it. It was it felt more like homework than anything else. So I think if people can enjoy the book and they actually enjoy reading it, and they can, if they get through it in a couple of days rather than this over a couple of months, then I think the content is just going to travel quite naturally. So I think that's always the best basis to communicate things, is that if people are, if they feel entertained by it, if they can relate to it, if they think some things in it are funny, then they're just going to remember more stuff. That information is going to pass a lot easier. It's a similar approach I took to barista competitions, in that I think if people are entertained, then like anything that they think about the coffee you're serving them, like everybody has their own prejudices, they kind of have their own expectations. It's a very complex thing. It's full of opinions and politics. But if you could go into a barista competition and, make people feel relaxed and ensure that they enjoy themselves, then they're just going to come along with what you're saying. You know what I mean? Like it's just easier to pass what you want to say to them. They're just a lot more receptive. So I think if people enjoy the book and they enjoy reading it, like if they're entertained by it and they think some of it's funny and they can relate to some of it, then the information is going to flow that bit more easier. You know what I mean? And that's in a way, strange sort of way, that's kind of the goal with the book, is that what essentially is quite complex stuff can be, just absorbed through osmosis, almost like that people just enjoy it and it just seeps naturally in. So that's kind of the goal of it.
Well, I think you've done a fantastic job of doing just that with the book. How could people reach out to you, and how can we get this book?
If you want to buy the book, you can go to whatiknowaboutrunningscoffeeshops.com or 3fe.com, and we'll be shipping the book internationally from there. There will be regional distributors. So in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, coffee camps are going to be distributing it there. We're hoping to line one up in the US very shortly. What I'll do is I say to people is just like, my Twitter handle is Dublin Barista, so I'll be on there letting people know what it is. But I think we'll be looking to get a distributor in the US very shortly. It was important to get the book out the door first in Europe and Ireland first, and then see where we go after that. But if you just want to buy one book, you can definitely go on to whatiknowaboutrunningscoffeeshops.com, and you can buy one there. And if anyone's out there listening that want to do distribution, then do drop me a line.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time and sharing all these insights with us. I really appreciate you coming along on the show. Thank
you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to finally be on here on the other side of the podium with the podcasting. I'm really enjoying the podcast, so thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I want to thank Colin Harmon for joining us on the show today and sharing his insights and wisdom with us from the book and his experiences being a shop owner. So one of the main things that I got from this talk with Colin was that part of the way that we improve as an industry is by focusing on the things that create sustainable and successful business. And this book is a helpful reminder, or maybe it's the first time that some of us will have heard it, that we should be focusing on things that aren't as sexy as what we would default to, that we do want to be paying attention to, do we have coffee experience? Are we doing the basics of running a coffee bar? Do we have a great business plan to go along with that great idea? What kind of a system do we have for our baristas and our staff to live within to create that great culture that they want to stay in and maybe even have a career in? I love what he said about how he tells his staff, you worry about the short term, I'll worry about the long term. And anybody in authority or leadership position knows that you have to live kind of in both areas. And that's a hard ask, but it's a necessary one. And I think this book is definitely going to be a helpful and fun manual for you to use in your journey in making that a reality in your stores. Again, that book is out now, and you can purchase it by going to whatiknowaboutrunningscoffeeshops.com. And there on the website, you will also find all of the other episodes of Keys to the Shop and their notes available for you to download. And you can also send me an email if you have comments or questions to chris@keystotheshop.com. And if you like this episode and what we're doing at Keys to the Shop, please subscribe to the show and share this episode with a friend who you think can benefit from the things that we talked about. I really appreciate all of you spending your time with us today. I hope that you get your hands on this book by Colin Harmon. I know inside of it, you're going to find just a ton of keys to the shop.